I'm Tracy Austin, your host of the People Strategy Podcast. This show provides interviews with organizational leaders and ongoing coaching experiences that highlight elevating people in organizations through a people strategy roadmap. Welcome back to the People Strategy Podcast. My name is Tracy Austin, and I am your host and also the Chief Talent Officer here at Elevated Talent Consulting. And we are in the middle of a special series called our Leadership Development Series. And we have a special guest on with us for these 8 weeks. And so Adam Gruszcynski with Potawatomi Casino and Bingo. Potawatomi Casino Hotel. Did that change at some point in time?
It did. Originally, we were just a bingo hall, and then we added the casino, and then our name changed to a more marketing-friendly name of Potawatomi Casino Hotel.
You know, these names, let me tell you, I think I have slaughtered so many names on this podcast, and I know I'd said to you so many times, okay, how do I say your name? Mm-hmm. And you're like, Shin.
Yes.
Ski. And I was like, okay. So now every time I say it, like, I think it's getting better.
It is. The old like gur like a tiger, shin like your body part, ski like the sport really, I think, helps solidify your pronunciation of my last name. So great job.
I love that. You know, my name's easy now. It's Austin, but it did not used to be. And I used to say, I am not a big green monster. And it's, it rhymes with jerk. And I would just make everybody laugh.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
All of the fun things. So today we're talking about employee engagement, which is part of the reason why I, just spent a little bit kind of laughing about names and this and that. Because how do we engage with folks? I'm curious. Like, how do you engage with your team, whether they're on your team or not?
A lot of times it's just in conversations that have occurred, finding common ground that I have in common with the person, and then talking about that common thing appropriately. Like if I know someone is a big fan of the Packers and Brewers and the Bucks, and I'm a fan of those things too. If there's, the Packers game happening, we can talk about what happened in the Packers game, how, for 2 weeks, not having a kicker killed us, and now having a kicker who can make a game-winning field goal is a big deal. You just find common grounds. Or back on in HBO when Game of Thrones was on TV, that was a very popular show amongst the IT department here. Everybody would watch it, and then come Monday, everybody would be at the water cooler talking about, can you believe what just happened? And like, you just got to find that common ground to start those conversations. And once you find that one thing, chances are you'll find a second and a third thing, or you'll find out that the person's married and they have kids and their interests, and then you use that information just to have natural conversations.
Yeah, absolutely.
To make that connectivity and the cohesiveness of the department happen.
Yeah, for sure. Because there's many functions of engagement. So we're going to start with some not so fun ones today. So here's a couple employee engagement numbers that I think are important to kind of look at. And then I'd love to jump off of this and really get your insight on if you've seen this in your organization. And for our listeners, like, I'd love you just to think about this and go, what is it in my organization? So organizations are 21% more profitable when they have a highly engaged workforce. And we'll talk a little bit about what engagement is here in a minute. But 80% of the workforce is not engaged. Have you noticed that, Adam, or have you seen that over time and how you're engaging your workforce?
I have seen that. I don't necessarily know that was a big problem here. Some things that we've done as an organization that, in the grand scheme of things are rather small, but it helps just drive up employee engagement is when you work the casino floor here, you're required to wear a uniform. And that uniform is very picked out for you and not very exciting or fun or allow you to offer any sort of, personality come out. A while back, they made a rule that if an NFL football game is playing on a day a week, feel free to not wear the top of your uniform and wear a jersey of your favorite NFL team or your favorite NFL player. It doesn't seem like much, but it allows, the employee to let a little of their personality out, which makes them feel more engaged in where they're working, and then leads to more engagement with the customers, which makes the customers have a better time. And it's that trickle down effect from just allowing somebody to wear a jersey of their favorite football player or team.
Yeah, absolutely. So in college, in my first job right after college, I worked at Sears. The old Sears store that's no longer around. It was around forever. And it was black shirt, black pants, black shoes. There was no stipulation on what your socks were. So let me tell you, we went out and found the most fun socks. And the conversation was always around who's wearing what socks today and what is it? Because it was the only way to differentiate within that, right? So I don't know if you dictate what socks people wear and if they're fun socks or not, but just the things. And I think that goes to something around, 1 in 3 folks that get bored at work found new jobs. So as we talk about leadership development and how we lead folks the way they need to be led is knowing when they've hit kind of the top within the role that they're in, and how do we create and role growth so that we don't lose them to turnover for being bored.
That is something, I've heard here and I have seen somewhat. And one of the things we've done in the department to combat that is, create different, I'll call them tiers of the same job. So, you have your, you have your IT support technician, which is your basic role. And then you have like a lead or a senior position above it. And then with each tier, there's more responsibilities that allow the person to grow and do more. And then, if they're doing really good, they can continue to elevate up that ladder. So it's just not doing the same thing. And that's one of the things we've done here to try to combat any sort of boredom and to foster growth.
I love that. We call that talent pathway planning. And I believe that there is a podcast about that within our team retention program is how do you create those talent pathway plans to really support that job laddering, both in role growth and into either people management positions or people leader positions or project management positions, because we're not all created to lead people.
Correct. Yep. 100%.
Some more stats here. 73% of folks think of leaving if the right position opened up. And, that one for me, and especially with the leaders that we work with, it is really getting curious about what folks want. So I have 2 questions and I may have asked you this before, Adam, I don't remember, but I'm going to ask you 2 questions and it's going to tie into this. Are you ready?
Yes.
What is a work bucket list item that you have?
A work bucket list item I have. I have one, and I'll have to I'll say thank my wife because she's kind of been pushing me in this direction. And I tell her I'm not there yet, but one day I will be. Since, you and I have started, talking, and I was on your podcast earlier in the year, I believe, I've increased my profile online, which has allowed me to speak at events and have talks to people. And that's all great. Some of them are at conferences, some of them are at schools. But since I've been at at conferences and have presented at conferences, I've not presented as a keynote or, a closing note. And one day I would love at some conference to either be the opening or the closing speaker. I know I'm not there yet, but that doesn't mean I can't be. And I know keep working on that path that one day I'll be able to do that.
I love this. So what is a personal bucket list item for yourself?
Personal bucket list item for myself. I enjoy golfing, but am not necessarily great at it. I would like to be better at my golf game, which is hard because you have to dedicate time to it, which is tricky with 2 little ones. So somehow find a better balance of being able to golf more and yet keep my wife and kids happy.
All right. So I want our listeners to listen up to this. All right. Here's one way of engaging. So 2 things that are important to you is you want to improve your golf game and you want to open or close a keynote at a conference. So if I'm your manager or your leader, and I know that those 2 things are incredibly important to you, and they align, or I can make them align with the business goals that we have, how do I tie those things together? Right? And so what we're doing is we're engaging folks of what's important to them into what's important to the business. Does business happen on the golf course? Of course it does. Does Adam keynoting a conference. By the way, anyone listening, if you need an opening or closing IT keynote, ping Adam because it's on his work bucket list and we're going to put that out there, right? And that's what, mine is, I do speaking all over the place. And that's kind of one of it too, right? It's like, what is that? So Adam, by the end of, once this is aired, I think in 2025, you're going to golf more and you're probably going to open or close a conference. Just a prediction, right?
I'll let you know how true that is.
But with that being said, is how do we engage our team, right? Now I have insight into what is important for you, both from a family balance. And by the way, if you haven't listened to last week's podcast, where I coached Adam on work-life balance, and he was so incredibly uncomfortable and was not going to let me coach him, and I forced him into it. Was it that bad?
No, it wasn't that bad.
Was it good?
Yes, there was some positive things that came out of it. And I think it was a great way for the listeners and viewers to experience what coaching looks like, especially if you've never been exposed to it before.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we'll get back on task here. Squirrel all over the place. But
shiny object.
Yeah, going back to, so the stat we started with was 73% of people think of leaving if the right position is open. So we're getting into what is important to you that keeps you engaged here so you're not thinking of leaving. If we know we've got a work bucket list item and we've got a personal bucket list item, if those things can align and we can start supporting the person reaching personal and professional goals together, either within the role or in those next level roles as they open up, going back to Adam, what you said before about talent pathway planning, when we have that open communication, we're engaging you in creating your future now by planning it, much like last week we talked about, planning work-life balance. It was all about, let's create a plan, let's put it on our calendar, let's put the goals out there, and then they're much more easily hittable. Yeah, I think that's a word. We're much more easily able to hit them within that. So that's one way that we can truly engage folks. So I'm curious, how did all of that land for you?
No, that 100% makes sense. That if you find more reasons for the employee to, find reasons to come to work or be happy at work or offer something that, who's going to help me golf more, at another place of employment other than here, that's another reason, another feather in Potawatomi's hat for me to stay here, where I might not be able to get that somewhere else. So that's just, it just makes sense.
How often do you golf with Potawatomi? Like, how many golf outings are there a year?
There are a lot, but I am not able to participate in all of them just because of the various things we have going on here.
But that means, and I know you're recruiting right now, right? Did folks on your team get to go golf?
Yes, if I can't go, I'm more than happy to pass along the invitation to other people in the department. So at least there is some representation. Mm-hmm.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So let's look at some other areas where we see disengagement and engagement. For organizations that have a highly engaged culture, they create 4 times more revenue. And these 2 numbers scared the heck out of me the first time I read them. So I'll read them both and then we can banter about them a little bit. Is 29% of employees are happy with their development opportunities. That means that what? If my math is right, 71% of folks are not happy with their development opportunities at work.
Mm-hmm. That isn't a crazy stat. I was surprised when you gave that to me ahead of time. That was alarming.
Yeah. And if we think about that, how do we solve that? We solve that with engaging them in, hey, what's important to you? What's a work bucket list? Where do you want to go in your career? And here's where we're at, having those truly accountable conversations around performance that aren't performance reviews that feel so scary, but just the day-to-day dialogue of leading and having them starting to make those decisions that they can make to step into that. Anything else you want to talk about with development as you've developed so many folks within your department?
I think, and this is credit to you that I've flat out stolen this from your podcast.
Perfect. I love it.
You started asking in one podcast, you talked about, with the upcoming year, fiscal year start differently for every organization, but as the fiscal year starts, one of the good things that you can do is what is a career goal that you have in the upcoming year? And that is a question I've started asking my managers. I'm like, I don't want an answer now. I would like one next week when we meet, but this is the question. And then based off of their feedback, I can use to develop and kind of not plot their course, but work with them over the next course of the year to achieve that goal, which, could mean development professionally or in however that may look. And then it also helps with retention because you're creating that extra connection because you're taking the time to ask something that is important to them and then working to help them achieve that goal, which just, creates that bond and makes it even stronger for the employee and the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. And again, it ties them to it because now they feel like, hey, a position is here. I know what it is. I know what I need to do in order to get into it. And guess what? There's in-role growth if that isn't available yet.
Correct.
So the last stat I had is 37% of employees say employee recognition is the most important support method. And there's several others and, so 37%. So what does employee recognition look like? And there's a key distinction between employee recognition and employee appreciation. And I think that it's important to note that. But how do our employees want to be appreciated or recognized? And what are those other things that they need to support their growth? So I'm curious, how often does that conversation happen with team members?
Here, it's more I have that conversation with my management of what can we do to recognize, the individual contributors, the people in the weeds doing all the hard work that make, the department run and the lights stay on at the organization. And we've come up with some things that we've done to try to recognize those who do the work. And one of the things is we created a program where we're tying it to our fiscal year that once a quarter, we are going to recognize one of the doers. And it's not someone who, I'm going to pick out. It is they have to be nominated. They can be nominated by their peers in the department. They can be nominated by someone outside the department, a business partner for, doing great work, going above and beyond, doing something that stands out. I don't want to, call it a caught being good, but in middle school and high school, there was that caught being good cards and you got to get a prize, right? So that's what I kind of, talk about it as internally. And then, everyone who gets nominated goes into review. And the whole point is myself and my CIO, we're, going to look at who out of all the nominations are the three that stand out the most. And then we're having someone who's not in the department, decide who truly did, the most recognizable, worthy act for that department. And then we have a bunch of cool stuff lined up for them. That's something that didn't exist that we kind of built together over the last couple of weeks and just implemented October 1st. And a lot of that inspiration was taken from, listening to the podcasts that you put out. So that's kind of one thing we're doing for an employee recognition. I think in September, it was National IT Recognition Day. You're supposed to, say thank you to all those who work in IT. Don't know how many people do that or knew that, but now and maybe next September, thank your guy who resets your password at work. To kind of just show our appreciation and recognize all the hard work that everyone did. We had jackets made up for everybody in the IT department that, Potawatomi Casino Hotel information technology with our logo on it. And that was, a rather small gesture, but really well received within the department. Because that's not something we've really done before. And it's sometimes those small gestures of recognizing what you do that go a long way. And I think, the stat you just gave, is proof to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's that appreciation, right? And understanding you've got a number of different ways of doing that. We've got a podcast, I'll link it in the show notes. Dr. White from 5 Languages of Appreciation, the 5 Love Languages to the 5 Languages of Appreciation at Work, was on the show a while back talking a little bit about what are those languages of appreciation? How do we really learn that in order to do that? And so, that's something I actually went and got that certification for that training because it's so incredibly powerful when we feel seen because we're appreciated the way we want to be appreciated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, recognition can be as simple as a thank you too. It doesn't have to be some grandiose gesture or praise. Just saying thank you to somebody who did a good job or came in on their day off because someone called in sick. Saying thank you goes a long way.
100%. And we all like to be appreciated differently. So really understanding that, which is, when we look at those 5 the 4, drivers of employee engagement, one of them is fit to role. We all have different behavioral kind of models, right? So we use predictive index here, but like we all have different behaviors that are natural to us, and every role has certain things it needs, right? So it's like,
Yep.
if we think about an accountant, they need to be very detail oriented. They need to be pretty process oriented. They're going to be pretty analytical, and more than likely they're going to be responsive. They know what they need to do, and they're going to be doing those same things every day. If you have somebody like me in that role who is very independently driven, I like a microphone in front of my face. I'm going to pivot on a dime, and I'm unrelentless with a no. And yet, details, I like bullet points. Probably not going to be great in an accounting role. It's not a right fit to a role. That's going to drive disengagement.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I want to comment on that you mentioned was not everybody likes to be recognized the same way. In our program that I just talked about of, acknowledging someone who went above and beyond, when I was working with some managers of thinking of what the prize or the gift should be, I thought this one thing would have been really cool. And it took another manager to open my eyes saying, well, you think that's really cool. And, maybe half of the people in the department will, the other half isn't going to want that. So we should give it an or choice. Like, you can have this or you can have this, because the other thing kind of will cover the other spectrum of somebody who may not like what you think is really cool. And, in hindsight, that seems like a no brainer, but sometimes it takes someone else, to say something for you to be like, you know what, you're right. Not everybody does like it the same way, and that's okay. And and having an option just shows your thoughtfulness and making that connection again, that, you're trying to, accommodate everybody, no matter what it is that you might have a preference to.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you were to say, Tracy, you did a great job on that podcast, here's some golf things. And I'm going to go, huh?
Right. Okay. What do I?
Golfing? I've never golfed. Like, if you want me to, I went to the driving range for the first time this year just because it was on a bucket list, because I wanted to see what it was about. And I don't, that's
not your cup of tea. Yeah, that's all right.
Now, if we want to go drive around in a golf cart and drink some beer and I can just play best ball that we can all laugh at, that might be different.
And you're in? All right. I'll keep that in mind for next summer.
Okay. We're going to do a golf outing where we can just drink beer? Now we're going to get into the HR on the Rocks podcast versus this one, right? But that goes into, again, trust and knowing enough about your team to know what's important to them.
Yeah. And I mean, I think this might be a good segue to talk about the 4 drivers of employee engagement. And you kind of elaborated on the first one, fit the role. And that is, 100% accurate, that during the interview process, or you should be looking, does the person present to be able to do the things that are laid out in the job description and the roles and responsibilities? If they're not, they're really not a great fit for that role. If they have some other qualities that might make them very attractive to the role, that's great. But if the core bread and butter are these things, and they don't seem to either want to do that or have given you hints that they're not really into that, just because there's a shiny part over here that you like, that's not the majority of what they need to do. Don't hire somebody just to hire them. You got to really make sure that they're the right person for the role.
Yeah, absolutely. And for our listeners, and Adam, you know this, I really like data. I do. I really love data. And I love when we have, data that tells us, yes, this is over a 50% predictor that this individual will be successful in the role. So we use predictive index for that, but with both looking at what's the behavioral data and what's the cognitive data of an individual to ensure that they can do the job. And that's so helpful within looking at fit to role, along with cultural alignment. If their personal values are not aligned with the core values of the organization, it's probably not going to work. And I know I've got several podcasts out there on that. And then, of course, they have to have the skill sets in order to do the job and be willing, at least minimal skill sets, with the ability to learn and to grow within that. The People Strategy Podcast is sponsored by the Leadership Development Program offered through Elevated Talent Consulting. Do you have folks in your organization that have just been promoted from the doer to the leader? Well, we have a program specifically for you that trains on the specific ways for an individual to be a leader. versus to be the doer of all of the things. In this program, we partner with learners to experience and create their own leadership around time management, delegation, coaching, accountability, and change management. Head to the link at the bottom of this page to find out more and sign up.
So we kind of talked about fit to role. The next driver would be the team. What are your thoughts on the team?
Yeah, so the team is so fun, right? And it's like with any team that we create, we want to like turn up everybody's strengths that's on that based on the strategy that team is executing. Because like even your IT team right now, you've got different projects that are running. So there's different teams associated with each of those projects. So some of those may have different strategies, whereas, hey, we've got a strategy here where we're doing something brand new we've never done before. Whereas other teams are literally ensuring that the thing is running correctly and you don't get calls at 2 a.m. and you just need to make sure that runs on time and continues within that. So there's different players that you need on those teams to ensure that the business outcome is actually hit. And so when we are putting teams together, it's not only looking to say, do we have the fit to role, but it's also, do we have the right team dynamics to really execute that strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think within each team, individuals that comprise that team have different ways that they work effectively. And being a leader, you have to identify how those people work. Working on a project, there might be a lot of work that needs to be done by just one person, doing configuration or data entry. And that, skill set requires somebody to just, be isolated and maybe put, earbuds in their ears and listen to music while they just jam away entering data. And there's another role of it where, the person needs to work with another person in this department and that department. It's kind of like a group work. But if the person who, in your team is doing the group work doesn't like doing group work, that's not the best use of those people's talents, where they might be better off doing the isolated, configuration or data entry. And you have somebody who likes working in a group setting, collaborating with others outside of the department. Finding that right balance of people's skill sets within the team and then aligning them to do what they do and do it how they like to do it is also very important when setting up that team for success.
Yeah, 100%. And I think when we look at that, we talked about this last week and I think the week before as well, but it's looking at trust, right? Do I trust the folks on my team to have my back? And do I trust my leader to have my back, to be able to give me the feedback that I need to grow, but do it in a way that I can truly grow? And I know you talked about that last week as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just to that, individual people that make up the team work a certain way, they respond to directions a certain way. How directing this person works well for them might not work for the other person, and figuring out how to give the direction to make the individuals that comprise that team successful is a big part of having a successful team.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love easy buttons. And I mean, I've talked about predictive index here a little bit, but one of the things I love about predictive index is there's the manager strategy guide. So essentially stating, hey, Tracy, if you're managing Adam, this is what Adam needs from you as a leader. And I'm going to give you that manager strategy guide and say, hey, Adam, is this what you need? And you're going to go, yeah, or no, or whatever it is, because you are always the expert on yourself. But that way I'm leading you the way that you need to be led versus I'm going to lead you the way I need to be led, or the way that I've been taught to lead, which typically is not, which is why we have the leadership development program, because we're looking at these key things and that self-awareness, which is, am I really coming off the way that I think I am? And do I need to shift the way that I'm leading others because it's not effective based on their natural behavioral styles?
Yeah, and that's you saying that just sparked this idea in me. When I first got into management and leadership, I was not very good at that, directing others how they needed to be directed. I knew what I needed, and I just assumed the way I needed is the way everyone needs it, and that did not go well. That it was a little bumpy, and it took me some time to figure out that just because I need it this way, most people don't. Each person on the team had a different style that I needed to figure out. And once I figured that out and was able to give that to them, not only did the work output, go where it needed to go, but the relationship between myself and the individual, got better, because there wasn't like that prickly thing where I'm telling you what I need, but not telling you the way you need it. Right. And you figure that piece out, the team just flourishes.
Yeah, absolutely. And guess what? Sometimes it is you not being their leader, right? It's like
Yeah.
we're having an internal conversation right now, and I brought in one of our consultants, Morgan. I'm like, all right, Morgan, I need your help because I'm not leading this individual the way that she needs to be led. And quite honestly, I'm not sure that I can because she needs such great detail. And it's things I'm not an expert in this. I have the vision, the visionary. I know what I want and what those outcomes are. I don't know how to go create this thing within it. She's a completely opposite profile as I am, which is much more patience than I have. And she's like, oh, I got it.
Yeah.
So now
So
we
I
got
think
a translator in between. I'm like, yes.
I'm gonna kind of steal your bit. So I think the key takeaway from that is you need to find your whisperers for certain situations when you're in leadership that know how to handle things that you may not be necessarily skilled at, that you bring in the whisperer and they're able to help you get whatever you need accomplished.
Oh, 100%. And sometimes you're the whisperer and sometimes you're the problem. I was definitely the problem. I love it.
Yeah.
And that's that third driver of engagement, right? Is are you as a leader leading folks the way that they need to be led? And sometimes you are, and sometimes you're not. Sometimes you need to bring that person in between because you should not be leading them.
Right. And
Or you're
sometimes
turning
that's a
yourself
sign of a
into
good leader that I don't have what it takes, but I know someone else does. Let's bring them in to keep this train moving and stepping back and being okay with it. That's okay.
Yeah.
And that's a great sign of leadership, knowing when you're just not right for that specific moment.
And here's the deal. When every single person on your team is smarter than you are and you all have a role to play, that's an amazing thing.
Yes, I want to surround myself with people who are smarter than me because it makes my job significantly easier.
Oh my gosh, it definitely does.
Yes.
That goes back to the work-life balance thing, right?
Yep, absolutely, 100%.
So the last one is of the 4 drivers of engagement is culture. And that's really looking at, we talked a lot about this last week, I think, and that's really looking at mission, vision, values, or maybe it was week 1, I don't remember.
I think it was week 1, yeah.
Mission, vision, values, and that's, hey, are my personal values aligned with the organization's mission, vision, values? And if those two things are not in alignment, there is going to be some huge friction, which will typically have that person become disengaged from the organization.
Yeah, it's going to create dissatisfaction in your workplace, and having that is just not going to make you be a successful leader, no matter how much you want to be, which then just trickles down and has a poisoning effect to the team and the individuals. So having the right culture and the right leader for that culture is huge.
Yeah, absolutely. And so as you're listening into today's podcast, into employee engagement, I think that there's a couple key takeaways here. One is, just kind of do an assessment. Do we have the right people in the right role? If not, there's, I have data that can help us with that. But if not, really asking your team about what that is. Looking at, hey, where do they want to go? Getting super curious about what is important for them and what's important for the organization. Is your team growing in a different way because there's certain things that your organization's no longer doing? Great. How do you then start to steer that to ensure that we still have a right fit to role? Got the team calibration, the leader, and the culture. Anything else you want to add that I missed in that, Adam?
No, I think another great thing is self-awareness. That as a leader, you kind of have to evaluate yourself too and what you're doing and how well you're doing it. And sometimes that means taking a step back and looking at what you're doing and realizing I think I'm killing it in this area, but then maybe with some self-reflection, realize maybe I'm not as good as I think I am and I need some help. And you bring in that whisperer, or you don't have a particular skill set and looking to, give yourself that skill set either through, training, through a course, that you may offer or another organization offers, or if it's something technical, get in the technical training that you want, but just having the self-awareness to know that you are either doing it well or I need to take a step back and reevaluate. That's a very important skill set as a leader. And it doesn't matter if you're a new leader or a seasoned, grizzled veteran, self-awareness, I think, is important no matter what.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I know that you're a leader, your CIO is probably going to listen to our podcast and go, okay, what razzing are you going to get on that one?
Yeah. He's been, Garrett's been 100% supportive of me being on your podcast. And then since then, I've kind of branched out and appeared on a few others and had a more, I guess, well-recognized or well-seen social media profile. 100% supportive of it, and encourages it. And anytime tell him I have something new coming up, down the road, he's super excited for me. And I share everything I do with him whenever it becomes available, and he'll listen to it and sometimes give me a jab or two about something I may have said in a completely razzing, frat house, kind of way, which is great to have that support. And it's been kind of funny. Here in the organization, what I've done has been received really well by various people throughout the organization, through other departments. Marketing, public relations has all been very happy with what I've been doing and encouraging of it. And I know some of the other directors that I have closer relationships with have kind of given me the same razzing, saying like, you're doing such a great job. We're kind of being told we should follow Adam and do what you're doing. And we joke about it and laugh about it, but to kind of speak to that, not everybody can do this. It's not meant for everybody. That sometimes just the your personality makeup doesn't make you want to do this, or maybe you want to do it, but you're not good at it because you just need practice, or you just aren't meant to do it, and that's okay. Not everybody is cut out to do these types of things, but that's okay too. But if you are, great, embrace it. It's a great way to get out there and build your network, which can only help you down the road, whether you're looking to hire someone or maybe you're stuck in a situation and, chances are you're not the first person to encounter that situation. You can lean on that network that you've built and developed through all these different other avenues to help you resolve that problem faster.
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of goes back to that team, whereas, hey, you're doing something really, really well here. It doesn't mean everyone else needs to, because it's not the same. Yeah, they've got another skill set that
Correct.
fits in the gap as to where your weakness is, because the flip side of every strength is an opportunity that we want to be able to fill, which creates that team, right? And so as we wrap up today, wow, we covered a lot on employee engagement and really what that looks like. And, kind of from these employee engagement stats that are not necessarily great into how do we create that engagement by building trust, meeting folks where they're at, being truly curious about what it is that they want within their career, within their team, within their leader, and, that organizational fit as a whole. So, our podcast today is brought to you by Elevated Talent Consulting's Leadership Development Program. So if you have new leaders that are stepping into leadership, we would love to have them in one of our upcoming programs that are both offered virtually and live. We partner with a number of different chambers. And so you can find all of that information in the show notes. Any last thoughts, Adam?
Yeah. It wasn't a statistic you just shared, but you talked about it on a previous podcast, and I think it's very poignant here. It was that if you lose someone due to not being engaged in the workplace, the cost to replace that person is like 2 or 3 times the salary of what the person was making, for very explainable reasons. One, you got to find somebody now to replace them. And until you do, other employees are picking up the slack or doing the work of the person who left, which means they can't be doing their other jobs. So everything just kind of slows down because there's not enough people to do all the work. Once you find the person, depending on how long that may be, we all know every organization is having hiring difficulties for various reasons. Then you got to train the person. So how long is it going to take them to get up to speed to actually be a contributing member of the organization? Chances are that's not happening on day one. It's going to take some time. So when you factor in the cost of that, it's a lot, I think, easier and more cost effective to try to change these numbers or be in the percentage of the numbers where it is a positive than it is to be on the negative side. And I hope, what we're talking about, here today and previously and in future podcasts really helps leaders, make that change to make that employee engagement, a higher, more successful number in their organization.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. And with that, we will see you next week. Have a great week.
Bye, everybody. Take care. Be good.
Thank you so much for listening today. I'd love to connect with you. If you'd like to connect, you can find me on LinkedIn at Tracy, Traci Austin. And at our website at elevatedtalentconsulting.com. If you'd love to learn more about our process, please reach out to us. And again, thank you so much for listening and sharing your feedback with us through a review. Have a fantastic day.